Hi everyone, Nemo here. Welcome to part 2 of my series on the Church's response to the Ensign Peak Fund. The context of these videos is explained in a church article. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints uses the sacred tithes and generous donations of its members in worldwide efforts to love God and neighbour. In light of recent media stories that have misrepresented the Church's approach, the Church provides the following summary. That summary consisted of 3 videos along with some text, and we're going to look at the last 2 of those videos today. The recent media sources that are spoken about in the Church's article are the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal articles, which expose the $100 billion Ensign Peak Fund. Therefore, these videos are in response to that fund. The finances discussed in these videos, you would expect, would be the $100 billion in question. However, they often conflate this $100 billion fund with the operating budget of the Church, made up of tithes, to seek to justify the presence of the Ensign Peak Fund. We covered the operating budget in part 1, but as a quick summary, the Church receives $7 billion a year in tithing. The operating budget of the Church is $6 billion, and the extra $1 billion is put into savings. These savings have notably grown into the $100 billion sat in Ensign Peak. Now that we have that sorted, let's get to it.
Well, it takes a lot of resources for the Church to accomplish its mission.
It takes a lot of resources for the Church to accomplish its mission. We covered the threefold mission of the Church in the last video, but all the parts of that mission are paid out of the operating budget of the Church, made up of the tithes it receives. The Ensign Peak Fund does not contribute to the mission of the Church.
We generally speak about 6 areas of spendings, and you will understand them. These are the divinely appointed responsibilities of the Church mostly. The first one is to share the gospel with the world, and so as we know, we have about 70,000 missionaries around the world, and in more than 400 missions, and they need support, including resources.
This is from the Church's website regarding missionary work. Missionary work is voluntary. Missionaries fund their own missions, except for their transportation to and from their field of labour, and are not paid for their services. The vague term resources really just means flying missionaries to and from where they serve, which will no doubt be covered by the operating budget of the Church. Also bear in mind, many missionaries serve in the countries of their residency at the time of their call, meaning the cost of transporting missionaries to and from the field is reduced. The number of missionaries not sent abroad could be estimated at approximately 50%, given the fact that approximately 50% of LDS missionaries were brought back to their home country because of the COVID pandemic.
Second area, it's very simple. We have meeting houses. Every one of us, we members of the Church, we meet in meeting houses every Sunday, and 20,000 meeting houses that need to be built, maintained, and repaired, and renovated, and this is a huge operation.
Meeting houses are funded by tithes paid every year. Therefore, this is irrelevant to the Ensign Peak question.
Then, of course, caring for the poor and needy, the welfare programs, the humanitarian initiatives of the Church. We talk about billions of dollars being expended over the past few years.
This is a big one. He says we're talking about billions of dollars expended over the past few years. From a Church article in 2019, it said, the most recent annual report shows that the Church's humanitarian arm has given more than $2.2 billion in aid in 197 countries since it was created in 1985. This sounds like a lot, but there are 3 points I'd like to make. Firstly, the past few years is actually 34 years from the date of this video. Second, the Church does not directly use its own money to do humanitarian work. More often than not, when the Church touts an act of humanitarian or charitable work, it is actually something done by a non-profit called Latter-day Saint Charities, which is a separate legal entity from the Church. Its funds are separate to the funds of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It is related to the Church, but it makes clear on its website, the funds used to support Latter-day Saint Charities are given online or to local ecclesiastical leaders by members and friends of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Church's philanthropies department facilitates major or planned gifts. Donations of all sizes come from individuals and organizations all over the world. The humanitarian work the Church takes credit for is funded by individual members and their donations, As I said in my last video, I think the individual members of the church are amazing. It is their donations and volunteer hours that comprise the good work done by Latter-day Saint Charities. It has nothing to do with the tithing funds of the church, nor the $100 billion amassed at Ensign Peak. So Odakorse is stating a use of church funds that doesn't really exist in this context, because no tithing money or Ensign Peak money is used by Latter-day Saint Charities as far as I can tell. My third point: if every member gave their tithes to a local charity instead of to the LDS Church, they would do approximately twice as much, $6 billion worth to be exact, in just 1 year compared to the $2 billion the church did in 34 years. Just let that sink in. In 1 year, the members of the church could do $6 billion worth of charitable work, which has taken the church 34 years to do 3 times less. If the church were really interested in helping the poor and needy, this would be the most effective model. They could still run the church from the profits of their $100 billion with money to spare, because part of the tithe-based operation budget is portioned to be saved anyway. I explained that more in detail in my previous video, which you can watch here. But essentially, the Ensign Peak Fund would keep growing, humanitarian work would increase massively, and the members would know exactly where their sincere offerings to God are going. Everybody wins. Instead, Russell M. Nelson, as prophet and president of the church, had the audacity to say on his visit to the saints in Kenya, "We preach tithing to the poor people of the world because the poor people of the world have had cycles of poverty, generation after generation," he said. That same poverty continues from one generation to another until people pay their tithing. Boggles the mind that he would say that to those people when you consider that the Ensign Peak war chest that the church has amassed, which President Nelson knows about, is bigger than the entire country of Kenya's GDP at the time of his visit.
Of course, we can talk about temples and family history programs, building and fortifying families. There will be more in the future. Temples will cover the earth. There are also a lot of efforts are being provided in the field of education, promoting education, whether it is seminaries, institute programs, of course, the University of the Church. This is significant.
Seminary and institute is part of the operating fund of the church, which is made up of tithes. BYU is funded by tithes until at least the year 1990. I don't know the current state of its financial relationship with the church. You can enlighten me in the comments if you'd like. I do know, however, that the children of church leaders and members of the church get free and heavily discounted education at BYU, respectively. Contrast this, however, with the church's Perpetual education fund, which it uses to help people from developing countries gain an education and better themselves. That sounds good until you realise that unlike the usually well-off members of the church that receive free education, the children of general authorities and mission presidents, these poorer members are given assistance as a loan. The loan aspect in itself isn't unreasonable, but not only is the Perpetual Education Fund a loan, it is to be paid back with interest. Simply put, the children of church leaders get free university education, while those in developing nations have to pay the church back on a loan basis with interest.
And of course, the sixth area is the general administration of the church. So 6 areas, a variety of uses that all support the mission of the church.
There's a very quick 30-second video we can watch now on the spirit in which these financial decisions are taken.
It's a very humbling responsibility to take care of those sacred funds and to make those decisions or to recommend them to the First Presidency and the 12.
Right there is admission that the First Presidency and the 12 are aware of this fund.
And the 3 of us, we have a business background. And of course, we take this background with us as we look at those matters, and we use our experience, expertise in some fields. But ultimately, any decision is made in a spirit of prayer. We seek the will of the Lord, and we don't want to implement anything that would be ours. We try our best to be instruments in the hands of the Lord.
Ultimately, any decision is made in the spirit of prayer, essentially saying it's divine inspiration, it's beyond reproach because it's God's will that we're following. In short, all these videos seek to do is justify the presence of the $100 billion Ensign Peak Fund that the church has amassed, without directly addressing it. In doing so, they've cited uses of church money as justification, the money for which comes directly from tithe payers, none of which comes from the Ensign Peak Fund. So all these justifications are straw men. They're a way to show just how expensive the church is and what they need money for, but that doesn't pass muster when you have statements from the head of Ensign Peak saying the church doesn't need the money, and from him and the presiding bishopric saying that the operating budget of the church comes directly from tithe payers and other donations. Now I get that $6 billion, $100 billion, all these numbers are almost unfathomable. A lot of people, including myself, struggle to visualize these sums of money. The website MormonBillions.com has just recently been released, and it's a really easy way to help you visualize this. Check out my video of me going through that website and reacting as I go along. Thank you all for joining me. Make sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Bye now.